Hey, everybody. Welcome this week. We have Pastor Mack on the podcast with us, and I'm Kevin Hu, Director of Communications. And Pastor Mack, I got a quick question to start us off.
Yes, sir.
Out of all the pastors and leaders, Christian leaders in general that you're working with right now through Rooted, out of those who are married, what percentage would you say of them are also working through, in some shape or another, marital conflicts?
Oh man, I'd say I pray nobody hears this as a broad generalization. I would say all of them, right?
Oh, wait, it just dawned on me. Yeah, because someone's listening like, what are you talking about?
I would say all. I mean, because the reality is, as much emphasis as we give on the individual pastor and their pastoral setting, we also have to remember that whatever trauma, whatever crisis, whatever that pastor is going through, if that pastor is married, they are not going through it alone. I will admit, and I will confess that there are plenty of times where if there is something that is church related or even something spiritually internally that I'm going through, I may try to shield my spouse from it because I didn't want to bring her into my stuff because I know there's other things that she's dealing with, especially trying to, make our household run and keep our kids alive and all that good stuff. But the reality is, even in my quote unquote shielding her from whatever is going on at the church or with me, it has an effect on her. It does directly affect her. So I don't think I know a pastor that I've sat with that has, been in crisis or just, in discernment, and it hasn't directly affected their marriage in one way or another.
I was thinking about when you were talking about shielding, because I feel like I can relate to that. I can see why as well, right? And I think a lot
Absolutely.
of it too is, and by design, you have to, even for the sake of just anonymity for the people you shepherd and people that confide in you as a pastor, if they're sharing some pretty deep stuff, I think there's some relationships and marriages where they've made a commitment and boundary and saying, hey, I'm never going to let you know what's going on with X, Y, and Z, these people in the church, right? Because that's just, it ends with me. And I know some marriages and dynamics where they're like, no, like whatever you share with me, my spouse is going to know,
Right.
because we don't want that between us.
Right.
Right. So there's that element of it. Right. You were going to jump in and say something right there.
So so that confidentiality piece is a crazy space for pastors and leaders to hold, right? Because you're absolutely right. Part of it is you want to be a safe space for whoever the care seeker is to know that, hey, I'm here, this is safe, it's okay. But then there are some pastors who are legitimately conflicted because they feel like whatever has been unloaded on them, they feel like it's now a secret that they're keeping from their spouses. And out again, inserting my life, like I know for my wife and I, like our first few years of marriage, I set up some hours to do some pastoral counseling, spiritual direction, whatever the case may be. And we had this understanding of this seal of confidentiality that, nothing would go out and it was fine. But then stuff would unfold in front of her and she'd look at me and go, you knew this, didn't you? And I would be like, yeah, I did. And it did create, did she understand? Does she understand confidentiality? Absolutely. But is it hard for your spouse to be kind of left out of a part of your life because of the call? Yes, that's true as well. And so it is a weird tension that spouses have to hold, knowing that their partner may be withholding some information for the sake of ministry and confidentiality. It's understandable. It doesn't make it easier though.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking too, if you're part of a smaller congregation where you know everybody's name,
Yeah.
and you're interacting with them across different ministries, right? Like I think about the church that you were pastoring most recently and the one I was. It's very hard if I'm choosing not to tell my wife Becca about certain things that are going on, but it's like she's also going through it with these individuals.
Absolutely.
And I feel like I have inside information on something that could help, but it's like, no, it has to stop there. And so there, to me, in a church our size, interacting with all of those different types of individuals, it did become noticeable for me that there was a big chunk of what I was holding on to, both emotionally, what was taking up the headspace, that I was not giving to Becca. And I think after a while she felt that.
Yeah.
And I think her response to that is like, okay, fine. Like, you want to block that off part of your life, then maybe I will do some of that with you as well, and it became almost retaliatory. I don't blame her for it.
Yeah.
Just because it's like at that point, it's like we don't feel like we're walking together in that anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know how many people out there are working through something similar too, but.
Oh, but hear this. Whether it's physical, emotional, or spiritual, what goes in will come out in one way or another. Okay. And for me, I had created this thought, this imagination, if you will, in my mind, that I am being the protector of my family because I am not allowing those things to come into my marriage, to come into my house. I am compartmentalizing and leaving that there. But the reality is that's just not real. That's not honest. The truth of the matter is that we don't compartmentalize well. And it will come out in some way because if somebody drops something on you that is going to cause you to have anxiety or to worry, guess what? That worry is going to show up in your marriage. It's going to show up in your family. If it causes you to be angry, it's going to show up. And so I think you have to take each individual care seeker individually and let them know, like, establish some boundaries, like, for yourself, for that relationship, and for how that's going to show up in your marriage and for your family. Because unfortunately, our marriages get the lion's share of what comes out of us, and whether we are doing it consciously or subconsciously, if I'm worried, then that means or filled with anxiety because of some stuff that somebody shared with me, then that means that I'm removed from my wife. I'm not fully present to her because I'm noodling over what's going on over there. And that's what we do as pastors. If I'm angry, the exact same thing. If I'm trying to help an individual in crisis find resources, my mind is there. And I have to admit, sometimes it's not always thinking about my wife is at home cooking me a hot meal and she's waiting for me to show up so that we can all eat at the same time. Because I'm thinking, how can I help sister so-and-so keep her lights on and get the kids, all that stuff shows up. And so I think when we as pastors are honest with ourselves that what goes in will eventually come out in some way, we can enter into a relationship, a stronger relationship with our spouses to say, hey, am I distant? Have I been doing that? How can I be more present to you? How can I check in? Make sure that you reinforce the idea that I'm not withdrawing because I don't want you to do it or I don't think that you can handle it. But you all come up with a system that is best for your marriage, because like you said, everybody, Tori didn't respond the same way that Becca did, but I could totally understand why Becca responded in that way. Tori felt left out. My wife felt left out for a long time, and it just accepted it, that there's just a parts of me that she will just never get to know, which is crazy to me because I feel like I'm most transparent with her. Right. And so I definitely think that is something that every pastoral couple needs to sit down and have conversations about and continue to check in with each other as they move forward.
Something that came to mind too is like, I don't think I know of a single pastor out there, ministry leader, who would go into it and saying, I am going to make my spouse feel like they don't have access to this part of my life.
Right.
I'm going to allow the things that I carry on a regular basis to influence the way I parent, the way I love and care for my family. And I think every one of us does buy into that belief that we can't compartmentalize.
Yep.
And as long as I'm functional at home and I don't talk about the things that I just had to deal with, the death of somebody in the congregation or some crazy, drama broke out, whatever it is.
Right.
Because I'm not talking about it, I'm doing pretty dang good. I'm shielding, my family and protecting them. But what would you actually say then that person is doing, that pastor or that Christian leader is doing by trying to compartmentalize that way?
I think that there is some. You're trying to do a good thing. So hear me say that, my brother, my sister, pastor, like you are legitimately trying to serve. But I also wonder if you're being completely honest about how well you're compartmentalizing. I'm almost beginning to think, and I don't know if it's because I'm getting older, that compartmentalizing is a myth, just because of what I said previously about how things eventually will seep out, right? Like, I think about the waffle analogy, right? You pour a little syrup in one square of the waffle, and it's contained, right? Or at least we think it is. But the reality is, sooner or later, some of that syrup is going to seep over into another square, right? And the reality is that we have to be honest with ourselves that about who we are, about how we receive information, how things hit us spiritually. Now, I am I'm an Enneagram 9. I'm an intuitive. All the spiritual things I hit on the assessments, right? So for me, when I'm present with somebody, I'm fully present, both physically and spiritually, right? And so I do feel that. I do feel the weight. I cry with you. And so I know that there can't be a time that I'm sitting with somebody and they share with me about them watching their loved one actively die, and I not feel that.
Right.
I know me well enough to know that is going to sit with me. And because I know that, I then know that once that time is over, whether it's a counseling session or a phone call, whatever the case may be, I need to take some time to adequately address that grief that I'm feeling now. And maybe even have to tell my wife, like, look, somebody shared some stuff with me today that has broken my heart. It's not you, but I need you to pray with me. And honestly, that's kind of how our relationship has evolved. I need you to pray with me as I hold this with them, because just hearing it makes me not good. Like, I'm not good, but it's not my trauma. I'm just, and I need some help in releasing that in this moment, right? And so be honest. I got some friends though that have such emotionally tough skin that they could hear the worst of the worst, and they'd be like, man, what can we do to help? And it doesn't hit them, and I'm over here crying, and they're ready to go into action mode, right? So be honest about how you receive that information and what it is doing to you spiritually. I think there's plenty of times that even we see Jesus, taking time to process the things that are going on around him and the things that are going on with the people that are around him, right? Jesus gets word, Lazarus is dead. Shortest scripture in the verse, Jesus weeps, right? Jesus feels it. We can feel it, and it's okay. It doesn't make you less of a pastor. It doesn't mean that you don't have the skill set necessary to be with people in the midst of crisis and to help them work through their trauma. But the reality of the matter is that you got to understand that you are a human sitting with another human who is experiencing a very human experience. And both of you, once they invite you in, you're going to feel something. It's going to come out and manifest in some kind of way.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of all of this kind of in just the realm of the healing and the transformative power of the love of God. Right? Like, so here we go, hard shift, right?
Yep.
And so when I think about like everything we've been talking about, I feel like even my chest has been slowly tightening, because it brings up all those moments and all those times and a feeling like I don't know how to hold this anymore. Because I do believe that there's a point for everybody, right? Some of us have more bandwidth than others, and you can just hold on to a lot more.
Right.
For someone who, since you're talking about Enneagrams and things like that, like I'm more of an introvert. I tend to internalize a lot of my feelings and thoughts, and from everything that I've read and studied, it's like the folks who do that the most though tend to have the highest rates of depression, because you just keep internalizing it. You never process it. You never let it out, or whatever it is. So it takes me to those times where I just kept burying everything and just trying to carry everything. I know I shared this story at least once on a podcast here, but I remember Becca and I were having an argument one night about finances, and things, weren't really meeting, and we had to make some drastic changes, and it was a tough time. And I had made a commitment early on to put my daughter to sleep. I don't think Logan was here yet. But I was putting her to bed, and just kneeled down beside her bed, tucked her in, and she looked at me and she was like, "Daddy, what's wrong?" And I have always kind of took pride in being able to bury things. And here I'm trying to put on a smile for my daughter and, kiss her goodnight, Lord bless you and keep you, do a little thing. And she was like, "Daddy, what's wrong?" And I was like, it was so disarming that I think I just started crying in that moment. I didn't mean to. I was just like, oh my gosh. I think part of it was just like, not just sad that she saw that, but it was just sad that, like, just the realization of, like, this is what I'm keeping inside, and I can't keep it in anymore. And so anyways, so I think about that stuff and I go, my gosh, I'm just so tired. I don't know what to do. And this is why I was talking about the love of God piece, because if I'm honest, all of those moments, I feel like very much I'm alone. I'm the only one carrying it.
Sir, talk about it.
Right? So I'm the only one carrying it. If I don't do this, my marriage is going to fail.
Yeah.
If I don't take care of this, my congregant isn't going to get the need that they, their needs met.
Yeah.
The church isn't going to survive.
Yeah. I got to be the strong one.
There it is.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about kind of daughtership and sonship in this moment and what it means to be a beloved child of God?
Man, so I'm gonna answer that question with a story about one of my kids. So my wife and our family, my wife received a cancer diagnosis a few years ago. And so she had to have emergency surgery so that they could, and so they put this plan in place. And when I tell you everything happened within a 24-hour period, it was crazy, bro. She was sick. We went to urgent care. They saw some stuff. They sent us to the ER. The doctor comes in. They recommend surgery. So like within a 24-hour period, it was like, you're sick, go to the hospital. Oh, you're in the hospital. You need to have surgery, and you need to have surgery tomorrow. And so we did. She did. And the results of the surgery, praise God, they got everything. But the result of the surgery was that she would be on, due to some complications, at-home antibiotics for the next 6 weeks. So she had IV antibiotics for the next 6 weeks. And so she couldn't move because of the surgery. And so literally, thank God for my village, we turned our bedroom into a hospital room, right? So they discharge her, doing IV antibiotics, making sure she's eating on time, getting her up, doing physical therapy, blah, 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 blah. And one evening after I gave Tori her nighttime medication, I was just sitting in the room because I want to make sure you swallowed it okay, nobody's choking, everything's fine. And my oldest son, he comes to me and he sits next to me and he's staring at Tori just like I'm staring at Tori. And I look over at him and I recognize, oh my God, he's doing exactly what I'm doing right now. And I look at him and I said, I want you to go be a kid right now and go play. I'll take care of mama. I've got this.
Wow.
And as soon as I said that, he laid his hand on my shoulder and he just started bawling.
Oh my gosh.
To me, that's the illustration that I have when we think about how much the Father loves us, right? That we walk into the room with all this anxiety of like and we're looking at the thing, right? And then our Father looks at us and goes, I got this, go be. Right? We aren't alone, but it can feel very lonely, very isolating at any given time. But we're not alone. And we're not alone because we're loved. And not only are we not alone, but we're not responsible. And I think this is the thing that I would really want pastors to hear. We're not responsible for fixing the thing, right? We're not responsible for always holding the thing. So the scriptures tell us that we weep with those who are weeping and we rejoice with those who are rejoicing. That is our responsibility. But ultimately, we walk with our sisters and our brothers as they walk with Christ, or we point them to Christ to walk with him. It's not our responsibility to carry those burdens. It's not our responsibility to sit there and take on the anxiety and the worry. But that happens so much because we tell people and we tell pastors in training, you've got to be the strong one. You've got to be the presence of Jesus in this space. You've got to do this. You got to do that. Okay, well, if you are the representative of Jesus in that time, in that space, how would Jesus show up? Would Jesus tell you to get a stiff upper lip and keep it all to yourself? Or would he say, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden? Cast your cares upon me. For my yoke is easy and my burden. I think that's what Jesus would do. But in those moments, we forget that sometimes. And so, to anybody that's listening that is struggling with how do I compartmentalize, how do I hold, how do I keep my sanity and make sure that I don't go into depression and to make sure my marriage is good and to make sure I just want to remind you that our loving Father reminds us on a very regular basis that we can come to him. That he's right there in it with us, and we can cast whatever it is that we're carrying. It feels heavy to him. It's easy to preach. We could say amen to it, but sometimes we need almost daily reminders, moment to moment reminders, if you will, that he is right there with us, and that once we cast it to him, we are released to go be who he's created and called us to be.
It's powerful, man. It reminded me of this pastor many years ago, before I was married. Another brother, we were all going on this like kind of like a short-term missions, like a local missions trip together. And there was this older pastor and his wife, and they were like holding hands every night. And it was just a very loving thing to see. I didn't grow up like that. You know, my parents weren't like that, you know, but they were just sweet on each other and enjoying their time together. Anyways, this younger brother was asking for marital advice from him. He was just like, hey, pastor, I just noticed that you and your wife have such a sweet thing going. And, you know, how do I do that? You know, I'm thinking about proposing to my girl. And, how do you do it? And I think they were married for 30 plus years at this point.
Wow.
Anyways, and he's like, he spoke with such authority, you know. It was almost like who's the guy that did the Field of Dreams voice?
Oh, not Kevin Costner. Was it Kevin Costner?
No, he was in it, right? No.
Yeah, Costner was in it.
Like, if you build it, they will come. That voice.
Oh, the voice of God, like that guy. Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
He had this like this baritone kind of thing. Anyways, very authoritative. But he was just like, man, when I'm plugged in, like I know God's like that. Like, the love of God is flowing into my chest, and it satisfies every one of my needs. He's like, what I can do is I can show up for my wife on her darkest days, and I have so much to give her too, and I can help fill her up because of the love of God flowing through me. It's not me; it's what God's giving through me. And he goes, and then when she's in that space, and I'm in my darkest moments, that's when she lifts me up. And when I can't walk, when I can't see him, like, she's guiding me in that place and filling me up. And he goes, and my brother, what you're seeing right now, what you're witnessing right now, is what happens when both of us are tapped into that love of God. And that love is flowing into us.
That's it.
And you're just seeing that circulate and flow between them. I sat back and I was like, dang.
Yeah.
So I think to bring it back full circle then, Mack, is because we started talking about relationships and marriages and how they can often get neglected, you know, by leaders in the ministry. You know, we did a necessary and strong pivot to what does it mean to live in the love of God through all things, in the midst of all things. Wondering now if you can kind of bring us home a little bit then. So for the brother or sister out there leading who has been listening and goes, you know what? I haven't even thought about this in a long time. I just operated like this is business as usual. This is just how it is for us and leaders in ministry. We just, you know, our marriages are just going to take the necessary hits, and this is just how it is. How would you kind of bring this all together for us and maybe give us a couple of things to look for?
Yeah, so I would remember that, you know, my brother, sister, pastor, you are so loved that just like Kevin and I shared those stories for our children, about our children, no parent who loves their child is not going to give them what they need in order to be successful. And that includes our spouses. And, you know, every good and perfect gift comes from the Lord above, from the Father of light. And, you know, your spouse is a gift. And he or she is the gift that God has provided specifically to you, so that the two of you can, one, experience his love and grow in that love together. But two, so that you can support each other in doing the work that God has created and called you to do. And so, and I say this to me as I say it to you, that you are not a burden to your spouse. As a matter of fact, because they are a gift from God, your spouse is actually the resource that you need, that God knows that you need. And so it may not be full disclosure of everything, but what would happen if you would invite your spouse to pray with you about something? What would happen if you would invite your spouse just to say, hey, I'm going into some time of pastoral care. I've got this meeting coming up. Will you cover that time in prayer? Will you pray for that individual? What does it look like for you to set up boundaries in your pastoral care relationships? If you know that there are some things that are pretty heavy, that maybe you could share with your care seeker and say, hey, do you mind if I share this portion of what you just shared with my wife so that we, or my husband, so that we can be in prayer, we can support you better?
Yeah.
Be honest about how you take in and receive stuff. I understand that compartmentalization is a myth at best, in my opinion. I know some people will push back on that, but I'm the one with the mic right now, so you got to take it. And the reality is that what you take in will eventually come out somewhere. And ultimately, our marriages and our families are the ones that end up getting the hits because they're the ones that are closest to us. And so make sure that you're intentional about checking in with them and being honest about where they are. And I guarantee you they'll love you and appreciate you all the more. But lastly, I will say this: know that you're not doing this work alone. That the Father is, if it's a counseling session, the Father's sitting right there in the room. He's present. If it's a phone call, the Father's on the third line. He's listening. That you are not responsible. Y'all are not responsible for carrying the weight, carrying the load alone. That the Father in His love is standing there, and He wants to take whatever that load is off you, off y'all, off the marriage, out of the family, so that ultimately everyone involved can see and experience the love of God during this process. So, I'm so glad we had this conversation, because I think oftentimes that comment that you made before you asked me the question, that is it. Well, this is just it. This is just how marriages go. This is how it is in pastoral relationships. I've heard wives say it. I've heard husbands say it, and I'm honestly believe in my heart of hearts it doesn't have to be that way. That God can grow you and love you and your spouse in this process if you will allow Him into that place in your marriage.
Amen. Pastor Mack, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, bro, I love you. Thank you so much for this conversation. Like, now we both got to get off here and buy our wives some flowers or something.
That's right. That's right. I'm already clicking. I'm already over here looking.
You're already clicking. Already clicking.
All right, y'all. Well, hopefully it's been a blessing to all of you as well as it was for me. And until next time, we will talk to you soon.
God bless. Love y'all.